We are taking a constitutional time machine back to a really fascinating moment, a time when a massive private trading company suddenly finds itself the ruler of a subcontinent.
It's an incredible transformation.
It is. And we're going to look at those 85 critical years between 1773 and 1858. This is the period when the British Parliament, sometimes slowly, sometimes, quite clumsily, built the legal scaffolding for Indian governance.
That's the perfect way to put it, scaffolding.
Yeah.
Because this era of company rule isn't just a historical footnote. It's really the legal root system of modern India's administrative architecture.
So what's our mission today?
Our mission is to trace the big legislative milestones chronologically. We're talking the Regulating Acts, Pitts Act, and then all those charter acts that follow. We want to show you how London tried to control, centralize, and, well, eventually replace the East India Company as a political power.
And we have to remember the context here. It's so important. The EIC, the East India Company, it starts in 1608 as just a group of merchants.
Exactly, just traders. A charter from Queen Elizabeth I focused on spices, textiles. That was it.
Until the game completely changes.
Until the pivotal year of 1765. After the Battle of Buxar, the Mughal Emperor Shah Alam grants the company the Diwani.
And the Diwani is what, exactly?
It's the right to collect revenue and administer civil justice, and not just anywhere, but in the incredibly wealthy provinces of Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa. This was not a small thing.
So suddenly they're in charge of the money and the courts for millions of people.
Yes, they stopped being just a merchant house and became a territorial landlord. And that, you can imagine, set off some serious alarm bells back home in London.
And that first alarm bell rings almost immediately in 1773 with the Regulating Act. This is the first formal step by the British government, right?
The very first. It's them acknowledging that the company isn't just running a business anymore, it's running a fledgling empire.
So what's the first big change it makes on the ground, administratively?
It's the beginning of centralization. Before this, the EIC had 3 equal presidencies: Bengal, Bombay, and Madras, all peers. The 1773 Act completely shatters that.
How so?
It takes the governor of Bengal and redesignates him as the Governor General of Bengal. He becomes the central figure, the first one being Lord Warren Hastings.
But he wasn't a king. He couldn't just do what he wanted.
No, absolutely not. He was immediately given an executive council of 4 members, and decisions were often made by a majority vote, which, created this instant dynamic of tension and control. It made sure no one person could run wild.
And the other presidencies?
Bombay and Madras were now formally subordinate to the new Governor General in Calcutta. So Calcutta officially becomes the seat of British power in India.
Okay, so that's administration. But the act also tried to tackle 2 other huge issues, corruption and the courts.
Right. On the judicial side, they established the Supreme Court of Calcutta in 1774, a chief justice, 3 other judges, meant to administer proper justice.
And the corruption part.
That was aimed at the infamous nabobs, these company men getting obscenely rich. The act strictly prohibited them from engaging in any private trade or accepting gifts, presents, bribes, anything like that from the local population.
So on paper, a pretty solid attempt at a cleanup.
On paper, yes, but it immediately ran into problems, especially with that new Supreme Court, which is why we get the Amending Act of 1781, just a few years later, the Act of Settlement.
What was the jurisdictional mess they were trying to fix?
It was a classic power struggle. The Supreme Court in Calcutta was using English law. But who was it for? The company's own officials argued they were only accountable to the government in Calcutta, not this new separate court.
So what did the 1781 Act do?
It built a firewall. It explicitly exempted the Governor General, his council, and all company servants from the Supreme Court's jurisdiction for anything they did in their official capacity.
So the government's political decisions couldn't be constantly challenged in court.
Precisely. And they also did something very important on personal matters. The act said the court had to use the personal law of the defendants. So Hindus were judged by Hindu law, Muslims by Mohammedan law, a huge principle for legal continuity.
Okay, so these first acts feel like Parliament is sort of testing the waters.
They are, but then comes 1784 with Pitt's India Act. And this is where they stop testing and finally grab the reins in London. This is the start of the famous double government.
The double government? Explain that.
It's a major insight into how Britain chose to rule. The 1784 Act made a clear distinction. It said the EIC has commercial functions, buying and selling stuff, and its political functions, running territories, armies, collecting revenue.
And they split them up.
Exactly. The commercial side stayed with the company's court of directors, but for all the political stuff, they created a powerful new body in London, the Board of Control.
And this board of control could supervise everything: civil, military, revenue, the works.
Everything. And what's so fascinating is that this system was, well, it was complex, often inefficient, but that complexity served a purpose back in Britain.
Which was?
It let the British government exercise supreme control through the board, but they kept the company as the operator on the ground. So if something went badly wrong in India,
They could blame the company.
precisely, it was political control with plausible deniability. And you see that in the language. For the first time, the sources show the company's territories are officially called the British possessions in India. The mask was off.
So after setting up this double government, the focus seems to shift a bit. We get to the Act of 1786, which feels less like a grand constitutional plan and more personal.
It is. It's driven entirely by one man's demands, Lord Cornwallis.
A major military figure. He's appointed governor general, but he clearly looks at the setup that Hastings had with the council and says, no, thank you.
He basically laid out his terms, his non-negotiable.
Oh, are they?
Two big things. First, he demanded the power to override his council's decisions in special cases. He wanted to be able to act fast when he thought it was critical. And second, he insisted on also being the commander-in-chief.
And Parliament just gave it to him.
They did. The Act of 1786 was passed specifically to get him to take the job. It put an incredible amount of power into the hands of one single executive.
And that idea, that powerful executive, it's stuck around. The Charter Act of 1793 seems to make it permanent.
It does. It takes those special powers given to Cornwallis and extends them to all future governor-generals and to the governors of Bombay and Madras too. The strong, centralized executive was now the official model.
The 1793 Act also extended the company's trade monopoly for another 20 years.
It did. But there's a small financial detail in that act that is just so revealing. It's a real nugget for you.
Go on.
The salaries. The salaries of the members of the Board of Control and their staff back in London, the very people supervising India, were now to be paid out of Indian revenues.
Wait, really? So India wasn't just paying for its own administration on the ground, it was also paying the salaries of its regulators back in London.
It absolutely was. That tells you everything you need to know about the financial relationship. The burden of the entire colonial machine was placed squarely on the colonized territory.
Fast forward another 20 years, and the Charter Act of 1813 marks another huge shift. This time, it's economic.
It's the Industrial Revolution. Back in Britain, you have manufacturers in places like Manchester who are desperate for new markets, and they are hammering the government to end the EIC's monopoly.
And they get their wish.
Mostly. The 1813 Act is the moment of trade liberalization. It abolishes the company's trade monopoly in India, opening it to all British merchants. A huge win for the industrial lobby.
But the EIC held on to a couple of things, didn't they?
They fought hard and managed to keep their monopoly on two of the most profitable areas, the tea trade and all trade with China.
So beyond trade, the Act also formally asserts the sovereignty of the British Crown over the company's territories. No more ambiguity.
None. And it kicks off some major cultural shifts. The Act officially permits Christian missionaries to enter India, and it makes a specific provision for promoting Western education. This is the start of a conscious effort to introduce British cultural and legal ideas.
And one last thing, on the ground, it empowers local governments to start taxing people directly.
Yes, and to punish those who didn't pay. It was about building that granular local machinery of tax collection and enforcement.
This whole process, this march towards centralization, seems to just hit its absolute peak with the Charter Act of 1833. Historians call this the final step, right?
It is the final, most complete step toward a single, unified British administration.
And it comes at the ultimate title change. The Governor-General of Bengal is now officially the Governor-General of India. Lord William Bentinck is the first. What did that new title really mean?
It meant he held all civil and military power over the entire territory under British control. Full stop. And to make that centralization absolute, the governors of Bombay and Madras were completely stripped of their power to make laws.
So all lawmaking for British India now comes from one place.
One person, effectively. The Governor-General of India had exclusive legislative authority. And you see this in the language laws passed after this were no longer called regulations. They were called acts. to signal their superior central
And
authority.
EIC itself, its original purpose is gone.
Completely gone. The 1833 Act ends the company as a commercial business. It is now a purely administrative body holding its territories in trust for His Majesty. The transformation from trading company to administrative arm of the Crown is total.
With that maturity comes the question of who staffs this administration. The 1833 Act tried to reform the civil service, didn't it? Saying Indians shouldn't be barred from office.
It did, yes. A noble-sounding provision.
But it failed. Why?
It failed because the idea of an open competition for civil service jobs was met with just ferocious opposition from the court of directors.
The ones who ran the company.
Exactly. Their right to appoint people to these jobs' patronage was their last great source of power and influence. They saw losing it as an existential threat, and they successfully lobbied Parliament to kill that provision.
Which sets the stage perfectly for our final piece of legislation, the Charter Act of 1853, a true constitutional landmark.
It really is. Because for the first time, it formally separates the legislative and executive functions of the Governor General's Council. They weren't just a group of guys making rules anymore. They were creating a proper legislative body.
Like a mini parliament.
It acted exactly like one. The act created the Indian Central Legislative Council by adding 6 new legislative councilors. And this new wing used parliamentary procedures. Bills were read, debates were held. Legislation was finally being treated as a specialized function of government.
And on the civil service front, where 1833 failed, 1853 succeeds.
It does. The 1853 Act finally introduces an open competition system for the covenanted civil service. These are the top jobs. And it specifically opened them to Indians as well. This led directly to the Macaulay Committee in 1854 to work out the details.
So the company's patronage system is finally broken.
Destroyed. And it paved the way for a professional bureaucracy. They even made a small gesture toward local representation. 4 of those 6 new legislative members were appointed by the provincial governments of Madras, Bombay, Bengal, and Agra.
But the most telling feature of this act, the real signal that the EIC's days were numbered, was something that wasn't in it.
That's it exactly. Unlike all the previous charter acts, which had given the company a fixed term of rule, usually 20 years, the 1853 Act extended its authority without any end date.
Which sounds good, but it's not.
It's the opposite of good for them. That omission was a clear, unambiguous signal from Parliament. The company's rule was now entirely precarious. It could be terminated by the Crown at any moment for any reason.
So if we just step back and look at this whole constitutional arc, it starts in 1773 with a government just trying to stop corruption, and it ends in 1853 with a centralized state, a merit-based civil service, and a distinct legislative branch. It's an enormous project.
It's the journey of turning an ad hoc commercial empire into a functioning state governed, at least in theory, by the rule of law. These acts established the fundamental relationships between the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary principles that still underpin governance structures today.
And this whole framework, designed so carefully by Parliament over 80-odd years, brings us right to the brink of the next huge event. The system we've just detailed is about to be swept away in 1858, when the Crown assumes direct control after the seismic shock of the Sepoy Mutiny.
And that raises a really profound question for us to think about, one our sources point to. Given that the 1853 Act already showed Parliament was getting ready to end company rule anyway, probably peacefully, how did the sudden violent catalyst of the 1858 mutiny change the character of what came next? Well, was the legal centralization we've been talking about designed to lead to a more liberal form of government? Or did the violence of 1858 ensure that the Crown rule that followed would be defined by much more rigid, defensive, military-focused control instead? That's something to dig into next time.
Absolutely food for thought. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the legal foundations of the Raj.